I grew up on a farm and there was a dirt road and there were lots of animals and pets. I was a business analyst on Wall Street. Not everybody is meant to take a proactive role. A building is a business and it should be run like a business.
Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Tina Larson. Tina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Aaron, so much for having me.
I encourage everyone to watch this episode. Go on YouTube. Don't just listen, because you'll get to see Tina in her glory, New York City. We might even get some visitors in the building. That's what we're going for. And that's the energy. I purposely did not wear my NY Risk hat today because I want the NY energy just to flow in the conversation. And I don't need any props. Because talking to someone who loves New York City and its real estate and its charm as much as I do, I wouldn't say more because it's hard, is a real honor for me. So really, Tina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Tina, you are, in a minute, you're going to say more than just thank you, and everyone's going to hear your accent. You are from nowhere near New York City, and yet you have become one of the foremost experts, and we're going to get into this, on New York City, specifically the condo co-op market, which is really the lifeblood of New York City, on the personal end, what makes people live there. Everybody knows about dreaming of being in the city or having a second apartment there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yet you're from Sweden. How does Tina Larsson from Sweden end up not only in New York City, but falling in love with it, I hope, and everything about it? And just take us on the journey and how you got from point A to point B.
And thank you for that introduction. And not only that, do you know where I come from in Sweden? I grew up on a farm.
So basically, I just want to be clear, we're not going to ask you to turn the camera, but basically your childhood window looks exactly like your window now, like zero change. So you don't even need to tell us. We get it. Good, but I love that. Okay, so even more, a farm, not farm Sweden. To table, farm to cement, farm to concrete.
Yes, I grew up on a farm and there was a dirt road and there were lots of animals and pets and me and a bike. That's the only commonality. That how you see me on bikes all over the city. I still bike wherever I go. Anyways, okay. So I moved to New York. I had this big dream moving to New York. What's better than moving to New York, right? Can't get much better than that. I moved here. I went back to school. I'm probably the only Swede that didn't go to school in Sweden and paid full price to go to school here, right? I put myself through, I took my undergrad and I took my MBA and started working on Wall Street. And I was a business analyst on Wall Street, and I did that for over 20 years. And my husband and I bought an apartment. And as listeners may or may, Aaron, but listeners may or may not know. So in New York, approximately 60% of the population lives in an apartment. And if you live in an apartment, you can either rent or you can own. And if you own, that is either a co-op or a condo. And that's a legal structure. And for my purposes, it doesn't matter. I want to meet every single New York City co-op or condo owner so they can introduce me to their board. Anyways, long story short, I ended up in New York and and then my husband and I organized a coup in our building.
So I think it's interesting because, and this is no disrespect. Unfortunately, when my New York comes out, I am forced to apologize for the ego of being a New Yorker and thinking that I actually think that the world just like spins out its axis, not around the sun. but the whole world revolves around New York. But I think that it's an interesting comment about the hustle and about personal development, in that very often, and I know that you interact with these people, and that's what I want to ask you specifically. Very often, people reach their goal of home ownership, and as it relates to their home, they control their destiny. If I own a private home in Arkansas, so yes, obviously, if I have a problem, or a challenge, I need to be dependent upon others, a roofer, a plumber, etc. But I can have control over myself and those decisions. Yet, in arguably the craziest financial city in the world, where, and this is the fascinating part to me, more money gets spent per square foot than almost anywhere else, people are willing to completely give up that control, which you have to when you're in a building, but also remain somewhat ignorant to that. And I want to know, like, where do you think that comes from? Where do you think people get sidetracked? And I assume you believe that that's a mistake. I assume that when people are spending their last penny hard-earned money to invest in an apartment in New York City, that should be something that they at least, as much as you can, at least be knowledgeable about, even if you're not going to be on the board or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, we always encourage people to be on the board. I mean, if you just spent your largest investment of your lifetime, then you want to have a say, and the only way that you have a say, well, there are complainers who think that they have a say, but they don't really have a say. If you want an insight and you want to make a contribution to improve your own property values, then you need to be on the board.
But yet most people don't do that. And it's not because they lose the election. Most people never even run. Most people never even think about that. Obviously, listening to you, it makes total sense. But if they didn't read your book and they don't realize the perils of it, I want to talk about that. But it's like, it boggles my mind. As you said, people are willing to make a huge investment. They work for years and years and years, counting the pennies and the cents and the dollars to get to, oh, I can finally afford it. And then it's just someone else will control my investment.
Then they leave it up.
What are the excuses that you hear? What is that? Like, and why?
They don't know where to start. They don't know how to do it. They have heard horror stories of other people being on the board. They went to the annual meeting and people were throwing chairs around.
But you know what's interesting about that? And I think that we can talk a little about the human psyche, because I know that in your book you also discuss how people should be protected. I guess there are two kinds of personalities. There's the people who go to the annual meeting, just to borrow I know it's a little bit of an extreme example, although it has happened. It happened when my father shares parents taught. When someone is sitting watching those interactions, and it has a lot to do, by the way, with their business life as well, not just, we're using the board example here, but what kind of a person do we want to be? Do we want to be the person who sees the chairs getting thrown and we run away from it, even if that means that we lose the ability to have a say in protecting our investment? Or some would say, if people I'm sure there are people that go to board meetings, they say the chair is being thrown, and they're like, hold on, something's going on here, and now my antennas need to be up even more to protect myself. So what do you say to both of those people?
Well, first of all, I really encourage everyone to be nice. There's no reason to throw chairs. There's no matter how bad they are, they might not even be nice people, and they might be mismanaging, but that could be all that they can do. There's no reason not to be nice. Okay, so that's number one.
You grew up in Sweden, not a farm. I grew up in New York City. That's the difference between us right there.
And so listen to this one. In my opinion, New Yorkers are extremely nice and polite in comparison to the culture that I come from.
Touché.
Even on the farm. But, so not everybody is meant to take a proactive role. Not everybody is meant. They might not be in their genes. I don't know enough about what makes certain people do certain things. Typically, we have identified a few different types of people or their skills or their strengths that make good board members, or you make excellent board members. But I mean, in reality, it has also to do with your personality. Are you a go-getter, or are you a person who likes to watch other people do things? So you have a podcast. I don't have a podcast because I like to be on other people's podcasts, but that's a different. But you have a podcast. So you're a go-getter. You want to do things. You want to make things better, or however, whatever your reason are. But a lot of people work. If you have a corporation of 30,000 with 30,000 employees or 2,000 employees, not everybody is the leader, right? I mean, we have a lot of followers.
Yeah. As it relates to the board conversation on these real estate, and that is even a person, in my opinion, and you're right, I would be the first person even before I saw there was a problem to be on the board, and that's because I was raised. I think I discussed with you. My father said the best thing that my siblings and I forget. Co-ops, they were on the board. The best thing you do to protect your investment, because he saw the horror stories, knew about that, is to be on the board. But it just shocks me that that there has been and I think that I bring this up on the podcast because I think that it has broader implications and applications across the global business and attitude environment, that we can be in a position where people will mortgage their lives basically for eternity, and yet be able to turn off and I want to know what's going on mindset. And I think you and I will agree, then there's a 30% increase or an assessment, and now all of a sudden everyone wants to be asked the questions, be involved, comment, give their 2 cents, when maybe speaking to someone like you or being involved in the board a year ago, they would have been able to mitigate it, or at least been more knowledgeable about the subject. So
yeah,
I guess I'm trying to get to, you meet all these people. What do you believe is the reason that people don't care about this aspect of their lives?
I don't know that they don't care. I think that they think that it's a lot of time, but just like anything else. So one of the things that we do at my firm is to educate boards to use business tools that they use in their business. So boards are volunteers, right? So we have a building with 100 apartments, and then in the annual meeting they elect 5 to 10 board members, and then they have their own little. I know you, Aaron, you know this, but maybe readers or listeners.
I know, I go for it.
And then those operate their own little miniature government, basically. So they're the ones who make the decisions for the community of all 100 of them, of all the owners there. But they are volunteers. They're volunteers. They probably have a full-time job or maybe even a business. They have hobbies. They have families. So they don't have a whole lot of time. But then they have this misconception. Everybody's talking about this, and they are volunteers, and they have very limited amount of time. And they also have very limited knowledge on how to run a building. But then we have this whole misconception that property managers and all board members are saying, but we're volunteers, we don't have time and we don't have the knowledge. So therefore we leave it up to the property manager. So there's that whole thing. And then because of that, they don't use the tools that they use in their everyday business. We always encourage boards to use Google Sheets, Google surveys, use any kind of AI tools, any productivity tools for tasks and mundane things, and scheduling tools and Zoom calls. All of these different things that you use in your everyday business should be used as a board, because it is a business. A building is a business, and it should be run like a business. So therefore, even if people are volunteers, productivity tools and processes should be set up so that they don't waste any time. Don't have 3-hour board meetings. Nobody can be productive for 3 hours. We want half an hour board meetings, maybe 45, at the most 60 minutes, but not 3 hours, and not until 11 o'clock at night.
So You bought the apartment. You and your
Mm-hmm.
husband staged the coup.
Yeah.
You realized what was going on at the board. We've discussed that and that process and why someone should be involved with that. And then the next step was, and now we realize that there is a void or opportunity in the market where people are not thinking the way we did, and they should. Can you take us through that mind moment, that pivotal moment in the
Yes.
hustle where we went from Wall Street to writing books?
Yeah. So it was over a 3-year period that we were able to save our co-op $340,000. In doing that, it was basically our discovery of learning the industry. So my background as a business analyst, I was a general analyst. So I analyzed all kinds of industries. Oil one day and retail the next day and fast food the next day. And so during those 3 years when we saved all that money, we went like, well, wait a minute, the board doesn't have the knowledge or very limited knowledge. They might have, so if they have an architect, then obviously that person is very knowledgeable in that particular aspect, but they might not know anything about insurance. So we have the knowledge and then we have the time limitation. They don't have time. They're busy. And then we also realized that the property managers, the way that their business model works is so that one property manager has maybe we've heard up to 26 buildings, but that's not so common. So one property manager has 6 buildings or 10 buildings. That means that he's overseeing or taking actions on the board's decisions for that many businesses. That's a pretty intense job. So they wear many hats, and for many of their clients, which is basically their managers, and then they have to act on all. So doing any additional work is just a nuisance. Of course, they're going to do it if it's easy or if they can do it or if they have the resources, but they don't have a lot of time either. So they are also in a position where putting more time and effort into buildings is not what they want to do. And so now we have this position where buildings that were built in 1901, 1957, 1930, they're mismanaged, not because of the will, but because of lack of time and resources.
I agree. But then what made you say, I'm going to do something about that and reach out to the builder? Meaning, my point is, and this is what Keep Hustling is about. A lot of people might have realized that. A lot of people join the boards because they realize that. They deal with their own asset, but then there's the next step of, I think there's a business here.
Oh, okay. So we thought that there was a business there, but we didn't really know. And then we did some market research. We spoke with a few industry influencers and asked them that we knew, that we had gotten to know over those 3 years. So we asked them, did very minimal market research. I think we spoke with 3 people. And all 3 of them were like, yes, you should do it. That's exactly what we need in the industry. And the funny part is that none of those 3 have ever hired us for any of this.
Ain't that something, huh?
Yes. Yeah, so when we were doing some market research of the industry, we realized that the consultants that existed were specialists, whereas there was nobody who was a generalist. And that's what we wanted to do. And we started off with only offering our cost reduction services. That later grew into, based on popular demand and speaking with boards and figuring out how we could solve their pain points, into construction project management and our property management search service.
I love the fact that you took a personal challenge and then turned it into a business. And I think that when people think about what Keep Hustling is or what they want to do with their lives, many people take the first route that you took. right? You get a job, you get the standard job on Wall Street or the standard job in office, which I'm not in any way saying a person shouldn't do, because had you not done that, then you wouldn't have been able to afford the apartment that then you bought, which then led to this business, right? But so many people along the way, a new passion comes up for them where they're struck by something which could become a business and they don't take the first step to make that a further passionate business. Meaning, even as much as you probably enjoyed being a business analyst on Wall Street, when this opportunity came its way and you could be your own boss and start your own business and find a niche that was probably more passionate for you and you didn't even realize it, right? It wasn't that you hated what you were doing before.
No.
It was just that this was a better opportunity. And so many people are scared to take that leap. And yet, this number of years later, you're now an author, you're appearing on all these podcasts, you're dominating the city, and all of those things are happening that never would have happened if you said, okay, great, I have this problem, I solved it for myself in my building, I'm going to squash it and continue with my vanilla, for lack of a better term, job on Wall Street. So I think that is super, super inspiring. I have to ask you, this has nothing to do with Kipase, but I have to ask, what is the craziest thing that's happened to you in this business, either at a board meeting or interacting with the board or interacting with a property manager? This is the craziest city in the world. So give me something awesome, please. Please.
So we had a client that we parted ways. We provided them, in the first 3 months, we provided them with $250,000 in potential savings, and in 3 different areas. And I'm going to give you an example of one of them, but they turned down all 3 of them. Yes. So, and because we were on a cost reduction agreement, which is where we work on contingency, we made no money. But one of those was that they were spending, so they had a large building. They have a staff of, it was a few years ago, but I believe that they had a staff of 22 full-time people. Okay. And the people who work in the building, their job is to maintain the building. The building was paying an outside marble and brass polishing company $50,000 a year to come in and polish the marble and brass. So our suggestion was, let's go. So for the brass polishing, you don't need anything. You need an old t-shirt, right? But for the marble polishing, you need a marble polishing machine and you need specific solutions for those. And then every few years, you need to then hone it and you have to bring in a professional company to do that. But you don't have to do that very often and you don't have to do it quarterly. So the people who sold the machine, who would sell us the machine, so the machine is $2,000 or something. So that they actually come in and train the staff. And we have done this in other buildings, so therefore we know how to do this. And very often the overnight doorman, they have very little to do. So very often we suggest, it's up to the super to decide, or the resident manager to decide who would be qualified and who would do a good job and who would take pride in doing this, right? But very often the nighttime doorman who gets bored loves to do it, and then everybody in the building sees that person is doing it and everybody praises them for all of it. Anyways, long story short, they turned the marble polishing situation on, and we spoke with the resident manager. We said, do you think that your staff is qualified? You of 22 people are qualified? He was like, of course they should do it. He said, I don't understand why we pay $50,000 a year for someone else to do it. So that was my crazy story.
I do. Someone was on the tape. That's just I had to throw that in there. You reminded me this is not a political comment about unions or things like that, but I think I told you one of the all-time greatest stories in New York City folklore is my father, he should rest in peace, was on the board of our co-op, and one day he's coming home at night and he sees the doorman. The entrance of the building is in the middle of the block on 2nd Avenue, and he sees the doorman on the corner of the side street talking to someone. So as a born and bred New Yorker like me, my father complained to the management company, and he was brought to a union not a trial, whatever it was, the meeting where this this action, and they asked my father uh, what happened. He told them, and they said, "Why do you think that he should have been? What was wrong with this?" And my father said, "Well, his title is doorman, and he's supposed to be watching the door, and that's the security because there's an automatic door for the building. So in fact, one of the things in this building, which I totally get, is the overnight doorman can lock the door. Obviously, if they have to use the bathroom or things like that, and you have to wait for a few minutes to come back. But in general, right? Honestly, the person who was interviewing my father said, well, why do you think that he should be there? And my father said, because his title is doorman, and therefore, presumably, the doorman should be the man at the door. And they actually had to rewrite the job description for doorman to include at all times being sitting at the door. So I don't doubt your story. You are the author of a book. We're going to link it in the show notes. Living the High Life, How Smart Co-op and Condo Owners Protect Themselves and Their Investments. We're showing it right here. Before we get to our closing question, I would like to ask you, what is the most shocking thing that you learned while writing a book, either about yourself, being an author, or just the process of writing a book? Because I think that a lot of people should, like starting a podcast, and nobody does. So take us there, what it's like to not only be a business owner, but to be an author.
So writing a book. What I learned from writing a book is that writing the book was only a very small portion of writing a book. And if I knew how big of a job working with an editing team on editing the book, I knew the marketing part. I had heard that previously, that 90% of writing a book is the marketing of the book. So I had heard that, and I was prepared to do that since I'm marketing myself and our business anyway. So I figured that would work nicely together. But the editing part took a very long time, and it was actually more work than writing the book. And I think that maybe that when it comes to having a podcast, I did a little dabbling in podcast. Is not the podcast itself, it's the editing and the planning, the scheduling. That is really the time consuming part. And it's similar to writing a book. It's all the additional stuff that is very time consuming. It's not the actual putting 30,000 words on a piece of paper.
But yeah, you did it.
And I wrote it before chat.
And you did it, and you kept hustling through it. So as I said, I think when we first spoke, I love your business. I love the hustle. I love the idea. I love it's a novel idea, simple. Many people should have thought of it. Nobody did, or other people did. They just don't do it as well as you. So I love the idea. I love the hustle. I love the transformation. I love the evolution. I love the fact that you're willing to deal with every single crazy New Yorker and then some. So you have inspired my hustle. As you know, we have a closed tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite inspirational and motivational quote and what it means to their hustle. So with that, I'll say, Tina Larson, thank you again for being here, and take it away.
Never, never, never give up. Winston Churchill.
It's on my father's desk. Never, never give up. And that is the foundation of Keep Hustling. Tina, thank you so much for being here. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And of course, and always, never, never, never give up and keep hustling.
All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.